Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto 2 Blue Vortex speculation video. This one's going to be my speculation for chapter 18, which is coming out on the 20th. So we're just under a week away, and like usual I timed these to coincide with when we get our first official preview page from the official Naruto website. So here's a page from chapter 18, straight from the Naruto official website. So you can see here, they're highlighting that for sure some of the chapter is going to focus on the Konohamaru and Matsuri conversation, this distraction that's happening here. But of course you can see how meaningful I suppose this all is to Matsuri, and the translation that I saw is kind of very much highlighting the idea that this is a direct continuation of the previous chapter. As they continue to talk, they're kind of addressing the idea that she's beginning to feel like around him she can be the version of herself that she wants to be kind of in the future, and Konohamaru's just being like, oh yeah, like that's good to know. And then she asks him, I think the idea here is in the end like that, like, can I call you Konohamaru-chan? So it's like, can I refer to you more kind of normally, like we're kind of close kind of sort of idea. So things are, I guess, are beginning to heat up here, and we're building up to the kind of, is Konohamaru going to basically assassinate her using this kind of romance kind of situation as the distraction or not? That's the big setup here. So let's get into some key points just from chapter 17 as a bit of a recap. One thing that definitely gets highlighted early on in the chapter is that Yodo seems very over-eager, perhaps, to do what needs to be done to get Shinki back. That if something's going to go wrong on that side of the story, it might come from her. And because she is so eager, potentially because of romance feelings for Shinki, to get him back. Similarly, Sarada is still lost in thought over what Sumire said from the chapter before, for this, chapter 16, I believe. So that's still in play, and they really haven't addressed that for the most part. Obviously, addressing the preview page as well. The plan is for Konohamaru to use Matsuri's attraction to him to their advantage. He will keep her busy while the others lead Ryu away and potentially take him out. The exact timing of this, like how they're actually planning to do this, is a little bit unclear. Because obviously the idea is that they potentially have a fight or assassination take place over here. And they communicate back to Konohamaru that, like, okay, you tried to take her out as well. And it'll be interesting to see what the idea is for, like, which group tries to go for the kill first. Because there's a lot of mechanics that have to be in play here, where Ryu's Soul Thorn is only going to have a relatively small distance to travel to free Shinki. But the Matsuri one might have a much longer distance to go if they do manage to kind of take her out. They do confirm this dynamic, which is of course that to free a person from being trapped in a tree, you have to defeat the Divine Tree character that they're based on, take the Soul Thorn bulb at their core, and basically take it to the tree where the person is trapped, and this will apparently undo everything. So the person will be freed, and this should permanently kill the Divine Tree character as well. We do address that Boruto basically can't interfere. Now, are they doing this to directly say that, like, don't expect Boruto to just show up for every single fight, because basically the idea is that Boruto can't intervene, because if he intervenes, Juro will intervene, and they can't risk having Juro fight just in case he gets angry. If he gets too angry, they won't have a chance effectively. So they're just creating a situation where Boruto, with how powerful he is, why can't he just basically teleport into almost any location and just take out the weaker Divine Tree characters? Well, it's because Juro checks Boruto. So that fight's going to have to wait until the end. And of course, we know Boruto feels like he needs Kawaki powered up to do that. So this is why this part is so important. Kawaki confronting Amado to get his kind of limiters removed. Juro is, of course, buying books in Konoha, and the idea is we just have to let him roam around the town. He doesn't want to immediately come in and damage the place. He is interested. He likes the place. So we just had to allow that to happen until we decide when the fight's going to happen. And then yes, Kawaki finally confronts Amado after a bit of waiting here, but it seems like it's finally going to happen. And yeah, my initial prediction is just that I do think the chapter probably has to be some sort of a split chapter where probably roughly half and half. We have to focus on Kawaki Amado, but we also have to half focus on what's going on in the sand. The interesting point is just that like the Amado Kawaki thing feels like it should be a relatively simple dynamic, because Kawaki has all the power in the situation because he has Amado up against the wall, but also he has knowledge of the future thanks to Boruto basically pointing out that you should go to Amado to get your limiters unlocked. So a lot of this is going to put Amado a little bit on edge, but Amado's always tricky. He always knows more than other characters do. So is he going to turn the situation around and force a deal from Kawaki to make this happen? Is this going to be where we finally bring up Akebi, his daughter, again? Which has been something that I've been waiting for a pretty long time. Like, Amado is not going to like basically giving Kawaki the power to put himself at risk of dying. Because again, if Kawaki dies, so does Amado's chance of resurrecting his daughter, because it's Kawaki's kind of karma mark situation that is required to bring Akebi back. The exact mechanics of this we're not, I think, super sure about in terms of how it would affect Kawaki. So are we going to try and do this right now or not? Because otherwise, yeah, it does just sort of feel like this is going to be a conversation where like Amado tries to trick Kawaki, but Kawaki just is super blunt, focused, forces Amado's hand, he's empowered, and then we can get to the fight versus Jura kind of sooner rather than later. Is there something more to this? Probably because Amado's involved. I don't think they're just going to do a simple, he's intimidated, he does it, and we're just done, in and out in just a few pages. It feels like something else has to happen, and this is probably the Akebi situation needing to kind of come up again. So there's that. Other than that, I don't really know how this is going to go until we get into this dynamic and see Amado kind of doing stuff, basically. As for the Konohamaru stuff, because we know from the preview page, of course, that this is for sure going to be in the chapter, how much of it is a little bit unclear, because we do have two sides to this conflict. We have Konohamaru specifically distracting Matsuri with this one-on-one kind of, you know, let's talk, let's be friends kind of dynamic here. And then Ryu off with the other characters, the two sand and the two leaf kind of characters, the teens. There's a lot that needs to happen here. So yeah, this is obviously going to happen. We know it happens from the preview page. The one dynamic I do think that we're going to address is this idea of, because they pushed it so hard with Shikamaru explaining the mission, that basically pretend to be their friends, like effectively manipulate them, get close to them, and then take them out. This has always been a part of being a shinobi in the world of Naruto, like that you have to have this subterfuge aspect to it. It doesn't get focused on as much as you would think in terms of just directly sort of lying, almost like becoming someone else. We don't see this as much. So I'm wondering how much they're going to tackle this idea of, is Konohamaru going to feel conflicted about kind of really heavily manipulating someone's feelings here by kind of leaning into this kind of romance thing in terms of like his own feelings, but also hers as this kind of new type of being that's kind of only recently developing, and how does that all play into it? And because the idea is, as a shinobi, he should be okay with doing something like this for a normal mission. So why should it be different with a Divine Tree character? And if they do address the idea that there is an issue, I do think they need to bring him back on board with the mission, with the idea that her existence as like an intelligent being hinges upon Moegi not being kind of free to live basically as a character, and that needs to be a big part of it as well. So if they tackle that, I hope there is the nuance to this of like, you know, the characters should be focused, that we can't overly lean into the sympathy for these characters because they have their intelligence because they've captured another character. So yeah, so far he's doing pretty well, but there's definitely a sense of awkwardness. He's not super into the idea that this is going so down the kind of romance path overall. The only issues are going to be, if she, if she realizes what it is that she's feeling, maybe if she leans into the romance a bit more, that's going to put Konohamaru a little bit on edge, where he's fine with just kind of keeping her talking and being like, yeah, I don't mind talking to you. Let's go alone. But if she kind of pushes into that a little bit more, that might force Konohamaru to make some decisions. That's interesting. The Ryu side of the mission going wrong would, of course, alert her to the ruse, and then that suddenly puts him in a pretty dangerous position, because one-on-one, I don't think Konohamaru is going to be able to defeat her. He might be able to get himself out of a pretty disastrous situation, but he's not going to have a chance at winning here overall. And then, the timing is also going to be quite interesting, because clearly part of the mission is that they kind of want us to believe that at some point this relationship is going to get close enough that maybe a kiss or something like that is going to happen. And we're fully expecting Konohamaru is going to have to use this as the opportunity to assassinate her, as she's really distracted by what's about to happen. And it's the will he, won't he situation. Does he feel okay about doing this kind of manipulation, assassination type thing, or what? I don't see him, I don't see Matsuri just being killed because of this romance situation. I think something's going to go wrong that will either prevent Konohamaru, the timing will be such that he won't have to go through with it, or he will be forced to kind of abandon it just because he doesn't feel okay with doing this. They need to write it in the right way in terms of the sequencing on this to make it work. So what is actually going to mess up the plan? I do think the more obvious thing probably is stuff going wrong on this side of the story, and that will mess up what is going on with Konohamaru, and he might be breathing a sigh of relief that it's prevented maybe what was the idea at the end of their mission. Because it seems like what's happening on this side of the story with Ryu and the other characters is that they're bringing him away from Matsuri so that they can basically engineer a situation where they can, really 4-on-1 kind of defeat him kind of easily. It's not as manipulative in that they're lying to him to move him away from Matsuri, but there's not the really clear cut it's quite heavy emotional manipulation that maybe is going on the other side of the story. We do have a lot going on here in terms of a little bit of drama. We have two characters somewhat distracted by their feelings at the moment, Yodo and Sarada. Sarada more just completely lost in thought, and then Yodo more over eager. She might go off without thinking and make a mistake, whereas Sarada might just be distracted. The other two, Araya and Mitsuki, seem pretty laser focused in terms of what's going on, but again, there still remains the situation of how's this fight actually going to go and stuff like that. I do think there's a more likelihood of things going wrong on this side of the story, just because I do still feel Ryu is the more likely character to be defeated. I just think it makes sense that he's the new sand focused character, where because they've created the situation of Shinki sealed Gaara, so we need Ryu to free Shinki, but Ryu or Shinki can free Gaara. It feels like we're really playing with the idea that, okay, this is the one we can kind of resolve right now to kind of prove what they've told us correct, that this is in fact how you can defeat one of these, and it's how you can free one of the characters, and that will give us at least confidence that, okay, it's going to work for the other characters where we more kind of care about the result overall. And then just in general, I do think Matsuri's big fight is not happening right now. I do think what they're going to do is they will have Matsuri eventually realize what's happening here, that Konohamaru is kind of manipulating. He doesn't actually feel the same way that she feels, and I'm guessing she's going to be like absolutely enraged by this. But it will be a really strong setup for their eventual fight. That like Matsuri against like Konohamaru plus Moegi's team, and maybe some other characters, is probably going to be a pretty strong fight because of this kind of interesting situation where, depending on how they write it in full, it's going to be an interesting one because there's some odd feelings involved in it because of how maybe intense it may or may not get. Depends on how far they want to go with this. Again, I think it's the interesting point of just addressing almost like the morality of this in terms of this mission where you have to manipulate someone, and then how do you feel about doing that with a Divine Tree character versus someone else, and what it is to be a shinobi, the do what needs to be done approach that Shikamaru has, but then Konohamaru is Naruto's kind of personal student, and so Naruto never really leaned into this side of being a shinobi too much, and Konohamaru is kind of following in that tradition, so something's going to happen here for sure, definitely. So yeah, but on the Ryu side of things, just in terms of the logistics, they're moving away from where Matsuri is, but it doesn't feel like they're immediately heading to where Gaara and Shinki are, because they're investigating like stuff with Boruto. Now that could bring them down there, but it does feel like we need to get to this location. That's where it's going to happen, but like, how are we going to get there? If a fight begins, I'm assuming we're going to want to kind of, get here eventually, because again, Ryu's target is Gaara. So Ryu wants to consume Gaara, so he wants to go there to free Gaara, but also if he goes there and gets defeated, he's very close to kind of the thing that will lead to his permanent defeat. So it's actually a quite interesting setup where his ultimate victory and his ultimate defeat are kind of right next to each other in a way, and it might make for, I think, a really cool fight, depending on how it goes. But yeah, Ryu versus the Four Teens. It's an interesting one because, for the most part, it's four characters where, like, you wouldn't say we really know the full scope of their skill sets. Mitsuki, I think we have a decent sense just because we've seen him use Sage Mode, and like, okay, that's a pretty solid move. We know how that works. Sarada has good moves, but we don't have any clue what her, like, potential is, her scope is, because they really haven't addressed her skill set since we've come into Two Blue Vortex. The Sand Shinobi, again, not super clear, especially just from a manga perspective. Maybe if I went back and rewatched some anime episodes with those characters, I'd know a little bit better what's going on with them. But even then, this kind of older version of the characters, we don't really know what they're where they've developed overall. So it should be okay. And again, from the future vision stuff with Kashin Koji and Boruto, it seems to be the idea that this is not like an insane matchup. This is definitely a way it can play out. Though Kashin Koji did literally point out that, like, well, this is the way it should go. They should be able to defeat Ryu and then go back and help Konohamaru defeat Matsuri. But obviously, because they directly said that that's what the plan is, that's not actually what's going to happen. That's usually the way it works. So something's going to go awry. Like I said, there's the two Divine Tree characters here. I think one of them's getting defeated here, not both. So I think Matsuri is going to get away, but Ryu probably is going down. I think that's kind of what needs to happen here. So yeah, the Sarada, how skilled is she, is an interesting one. But then because we have this other dynamic going on with her, where she's more focused on how Sumire feels about things, it kind of feels like that's maybe going to distract from maybe getting to see just how skilled she is. Very unclear. The final thing I want to mention is just Ada. They did quickly highlight in the previous chapter that Shikamaru asks her to, like, look in on what's going on in the Sand Village, and she says, like, I'm a little bit worried because of Mamushi and the fact that if she looks in present day and tries to view something live, he seems to be able to see her through the omnipotence. So she's very worried about that. And then also we know that Mamoshi's target, the person he wants to consume, is Ada. They definitely need to set up that dynamic a little bit more. There's not a lot there. It's just, I'm guessing Mamushi is focused on Ada because Bug had some sort of an obsession or focus on Ada. And that's what's happening here. It's going to be that sort of maybe obsessive kind of focus on Ada. Demon, I guess, is going to be involved in this side of things as well. But again, we need to set this up a little bit more. So is Mamushi going to maybe surprise us and actually like view Ada watching what's going on in the sand? Is now the time to do this? You know, how close are we to getting towards bigger fights? Because if Ryu goes down, and then we've done decent setup for the Matsuri fight with like Konohamaru later on, it feels like we're roughly in place to over a sequence of chapters build towards some of the other fights, because pretty quickly getting to the point where unless something very complicated happens on this side of the plot, Kawaki is more or less going to be ready to go. Boruto basically is ready to go. I think the situation probably is just that we want to see if we can take out as many of the other Divine Tree characters as possible before we face Jura. But it's a tricky balance, because how many will have to go down before he gets properly angry? And what's, like, again, the sequence of all this stuff happening actually going to be. Because we still have other stuff to do. We still have to get to the Boruto Kawaki kind of personal conflict resolution. We still have to resolve the whole switcheroo dynamic in the aftermath of that. And then potentially do Otsutsuki stuff afterwards. So this arc that we're in right now is still just like an arc. So it's not the be-all, end-all for the series, so I don't think, like, we're here for, like, an eternity doing all of this stuff, but I'm also not sure how close to the end we necessarily are. So, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. What do you think is going to happen in Chapter 18? Do you agree with me that it is probably going to be a chapter split up mostly between these two dynamics, Kawaki Amado, and then also just the two sequences happening in the Sand Village? But let me know in the comments below. They're my thoughts. But yes, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.